So Donald Trump did what he said he was going to do and basically refused to concede the race. Donald Trump said before this election that for him to lose, he would have to be cheated. I think that's somewhat of a ludicrous statement, but it gives you where he was coming from to begin with. He attacked mail-in ballots. He called mail-in ballots in and of itself somehow a usurping of the potential election. He attacked the Postal Service, again, in a bid to stop the mail-in ballots. Now, he could have told his people vote by mail also. He wanted his people to go in and vote in the polls. He is going through all sorts of lawsuits right now, in addition to recounts, at the very least in Georgia, but there's probably going to be recounts in some of the other states. Donald Trump has been claiming widespread systemic election fraud. That's his claim. Now, the point becomes, if you're going to make that claim, you need to prove it. And Donald Trump, who lies as easily as he breathes, Mike Pompeo, who got on stage screaming at the height of his lungs that he lied, cheat, and stole for a living. Neither of these people have credibility, so I have no reason to accept either of these people's point of view without any kind of assertion or any kind of evidence. In the very specific case, one bit of evidence that right-wingers, Lindsey Graham, for example, Trump, for another example, they even handed it to the FBI apparently, had to do with ballot tampering in Pennsylvania. Now, Project Veritas, which I consider a trash organization, these guys put out lies all the time. This is not journalism in any real sense of the word. These guys are just propagandists of sorts, without the need for honesty. Without the need for honesty. And I suppose you can be a propagandist for honesty, but in this case, honesty need not necessarily apply in this case. But Project Veritas puts out an anonymous, I guess, post of somebody from Pennsylvania, a postal worker, saying that they witnessed ballot tampering. Fine. That story goes so far as to get the United States Postal Service Office of Inspector General involved. Now, this gentleman who comes out, Richard Hopkins, now he claimed that the postmaster in Pennsylvania instructed postal workers to backdate ballots mailed after Election Day. Now, again, this guy was being brought up by all sorts of right-wingers to point, oh, there is election fraud. You said there's no election fraud. There's evidence of election fraud. That guy just recanted. The guy just recanted. The guy just signed, recanted. On Monday, Hopkins told investigators from the United States Postal Service's Office of Inspector General that the allegations were not true. I'm reading this from the Washington Post, but there are multiple outlets covering the story. On Monday, he told investigators from the United States Postal Service's Office of Inspector General that the allegations were not true, and he signed an affidavit recanting his claims, according to the officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe an ongoing investigations. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee tweeted late Tuesday that the whistleblower completely recanted. Now, he didn't respond to comments. Hopkins didn't. But he put out a YouTube video. And in the YouTube video, he's basically saying, I never recanted. He says, but in a YouTube video posted on Tuesday night, he denied recanting. I'm here to say I did not recant my statements. That did not happen, he said. If his signature is on a document recanting his statements, then he recanted his statements. What I suspect happened was he realized how serious it was when he started talking to the United States Postal Service Office of the Inspector General, basically authorities. And he thought that something that he said could have been used against him and he could have been prosecuted. That's what I suspect probably was taking place. And he did not necessarily want to take that extra step into what he knew wasn't entirely true. Meaning it's one thing to put out an anonymous statement. It's another thing to be talking to the authorities on a statement that you put out. But he's at this point saying, yeah, I didn't do it, I didn't put it out. Project Veritas is trying to say that he didn't understand what he was signing. Because I suppose Richard Hopkins doesn't speak English all that well. No, I don't buy it. Personally, I think the guy lied. I think the guy started talking to authorities, realized how serious this was, and he signed on the line basically saying, I lied. I lied. I was full of shit. I was entirely full of shit. I didn't see anything. Then afterwards, goes back on YouTube and says, basically repudiating his previous repudiation. Utterly insane. The Erie postmaster, Rob Weisenbach, called the allegations 100% false in a Facebook post and said they were made by an employee that was recently disciplined multiple times. The Erie post office did not backdate any ballots, Weisenbach wrote. The Post Office Inspector General Office informed members of Congress in a briefing on Tuesday that Hopkins has recanted his allegations, according to a congressional aide. The investigators were first interviewed Hopkins on Friday, the aide said. Hopkins' allegations without his name were first aired Tuesday or last week by Project Veritas, an organization that uses deceptive tactics to expose what it says is bias and corruption in the mainstream media. Hopkins agreed to attach his name to allegations late last week. He was instantly celebrated by Trump supporters. Of course. Of course. Look, what I want is a transparent election. I want whoever wins, I want the public to be able to know that person has won. I don't want this stuff where people are like, oh, there's fraud here, there's fraud there. I want people to be able to know. Your members of Congress could go together and pass legislation to fix the voting system in the United States. They choose not to. I suspect they choose not to because some of them, all of them on some level want to be able to game it in some particular way. And so the gaming of the system goes beyond just the people who get votes. It goes into this kind of other shadow stuff where you push the margins. Nevertheless, despite that, all things being equal, I would want the people, whoever wins, and I don't have a dog in this hunt. I keep saying that. But I think Trump lost. And the problem for Trump is that Trump said before the tally that the mail-in voting was fraudulent in and of itself, meaning the very fact that the mail-in voting was fraudulent, the very fact that if he loses, he somehow was cheated. Yeah, I think this is nonsense. You have to be able to show that. And up to this point, he's been able to show nothing. And the guy that they were pointing to have some level of evidence recanted his story, and they recanted his recant. This is where you're at. This is where you are. Trump lost this race. That's where I'm at. Until something else comes forward that gives additional evidence or that gives something a little bit more bang for its buck, Trump lost this race. And his word in and of itself is not enough for it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a lawsuit couldn't be passed that changes something. But it would have to change a hell of a lot, considering Joe Biden is ahead by like 4.5 million votes at this point. And he seems to be extending his lead in Pennsylvania. So, I'll leave it here. I didn't want this one to go long. But, look, just because the Democratic Party is fucking horrendous, it doesn't mean that the other party are angels. Both can be miserable. Both can be screwing over this public. And both are. One being horrible, and me disliking one, doesn't in any way give any shine to the other. In the same way that I was skeptical about the Russiagate stuff, why wouldn't I be skeptical about this? Especially if it's coming out of the mouth of somebody like Trump. Do campaigns game the system? Yes. Do we have a grotesque electoral system in this country? Everything from the 5-hour voting lines, everything from the voter ID laws that tried to weed out various people in the voting population to the tune of margins. Even in the way we actively push against people voting. I mean, we don't make voting a holiday. We have people standing in those lines, despite those people having to go to jobs and whatnot. we do things to make it difficult in this country to vote. That is true. Interstate cross-check. That's true. Killing the Voting Rights Amendment, or at the very least, cutting its arms off. Yes, all of those things adversely affect voting in this country. Both parties know it. Both parties allow it. In this very specific instance, unless there is something that they have that gives more credence, more solid, legitimate evidence, this guy ain't it. Like, share, subscribe.